Welcome to the Mental Edit, where we keep it real, unfiltered, and honest because mental health is complicated. I'm Megan.
And I'm Rachel. We're here to have candid conversations about mental health, what it is, what it isn't, and everything in between.
The Mental Edit is for educational and informational purposes only. We are mental health professionals, but this podcast is not therapy, medical advice, or a substitute for professional treatment. If you're struggling, we encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health provider. And if you're in crisis, please seek immediate help from a trusted professional or emergency services. Now, let's get into it.
Okay. Welcome back to the Mental Edit. This is episode 4. We are going to cover today the vast category of personality disorders. So if you don't know what a personality disorder is, or you do, or you've experienced it, or have always wondered, this is the episode for you.
I feel like personality disorders are becoming more common, or the terms like narcissist, borderline in pop culture.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we touch on them so there is a baseline understanding of what a personality disorder is and isn't.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't you give us the definition of a personality disorder?
Yeah. So personality disorder is a mental health condition.
Yeah.
And it is a chronic mental health condition that can present in young adulthood or adolescence. And it affects our feelings, emotions, and behaviors. And usually these feelings, emotions, and behaviors don't align with what is typically portrayed or expected in culture or society.
I was going to say my marker is that it starts to impact all your relationships in your life.
They're very maladaptive.
Yes, very maladaptive. Yes,
Mhm.
which means the behaviors that you do, are counter to. We don't like the word normal, right? But society norms are like
Typical.
the way people conduct themselves, right? And I think the hallmark of a person with a personality disorder is they struggle with relationships and they don't have a lot of close people in their lives.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's not to say that personality disorders cannot be managed or put into remission with great therapy and self awareness and insight that comes with a dedication to understanding who you are and how you developed this personality disorder.
Yeah, I mean, a fun fact in therapy school is like this is the area we like don't touch so much just because like you said it requires really intense, not necessarily specialized, but I would say to help a personality disorder you have to have a rock solid relationship with your therapist because it involves a lot of feedback.
Mhm.
It involves being able to hear things about yourself you don't like, which people with personality disorders, it's very counterproductive,
Mhm.
like the way the therapy works to the facets of personality disorder. Does that make sense?
And it's very important to mention that the wrong type of therapy, such as cognitive behavioral therapy,
Oh, yeah.
for someone with, let's say, borderline personality disorder, could do more harm than good. So I think what's hard sometimes in approaching personality disorders with patients is there's a responsibility on the patient with the diagnosis. Maybe they feel that this is their fault or this happened because of patterns that they developed.
Yeah.
Whereas with other diagnoses such as anxiety, depression, PTSD, it can be more, not that personality disorders aren't a result of what happened to us, because most of the time they are. They come from trauma and they come
I would
from
kinda say that. I don't think you're born with them.
no, they result in usually how we were treated as children or what we experienced in childhood.
And what was modeled to us by our parents. There's also really interesting, not that we were gonna get into this today, there's really interesting,
Flip flop.
yeah, flip-flop, like, with if your parent has a personality disorder, you will get a different one, and that, as
In
it's
order
a
to
cycle you
cope with theirs. Yes. So, with personality disorders, I think the first step is helping the patient to understand how they developed or where it came from or where
yeah.
it's speaking from, the catalyst to this personality disorder, and then helping them to find where they're comfortable in taking the next steps.
Yeah.
So, today we're going to talk about some of the most common
Yeah.
personality disorders. In 20 minutes, we can't touch on all 10.
No, we would be doing a disservice.
And
Yeah.
we're not gonna be able to cover everything about the ones that we do talk about, but the ones we wanna talk about are the ones that we are hearing most in, culture and on
Yeah.
TikTok, Instagram.
Yeah, and to, like, stay in the theme of this series, we're just gonna talk about how the term is misused and what it really means.
Yes.
So we do wanna go over, though, there are 3 clusters of personality disorders, they're called. So cluster A is the odd eccentric cluster. So these are people who are paranoid, schizoid, or schizotypal. We're not going to touch on schizoid, schizotypal today. Very complicated.
Sometimes they can even be, that category can be confused with some neurodivergent autistic
Yeah.
traits at times.
Mhm.
So it's important to wean out the difference and have a great clinician who can help you understand the difference.
Yes. Cluster B, which is sort of the most well-known cluster,
That's
right?
the one we're going to be focused on the most.
Yeah. So these are the dramatic emotional. I think that's why they get the most attention, right? Antisocial, borderline, narcissistic, and histrionic.
Yes.
And then cluster C is the anxious fearful. So they're the avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive. So we did touch on obsessive compulsive personality disorder in our OCD episode. So if you do want to learn more about that, we do talk about it here.
OCPD.
OCPD, yeah. Okay, so let's get into it. So the first one we're going to talk about is paranoid. This is the only one from cluster A that we're going to talk about. So paranoid, there's so much to say about paranoid, right?
So there's being paranoid,
Mhm.
and then there's paranoid personality disorder.
Right.
So let's touch on maybe the difference between the two.
So I think where I see it used in popular culture is like, oh, I'm paranoid about that, right? So you would say that around some anxieties that you have, right? So I always need to like check that. I mean, this kind of goes into the OCD realm, but I need to like double check that the oven's off. I get
Mhm.
paranoid about that, right? Or I don't like when my kids are around water. I get paranoid about that. Understandable.
Or a partner has a weird name pop up on their phone and they're temporarily paranoid that this could be something impacting a relationship.
Yeah, so paranoid is a state that many people, almost all, everyone has something that they're paranoid about typically, right? Not everybody, but it's rooted in some kind of anxiety or worry that you're maybe manifesting or overblowing in your head. But what makes it a personality disorder?
So paranoid personality disorder, I would say, impacts our worldview and
Okay.
how we interact with the world. And with just being paranoid, we usually have, if we're a paranoid person or an instance of paranoia, at least a little bit of insight. But we see that with a personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder becomes part of this person's identity and really impacts their functioning, their work life. The paranoia is in many different facets and presentations of their life. So it's an overall, overarching, pervasive presentation where work, school, outings, family gatherings, there's this overall distrust or disbelief in people or situations around them or with society or with political climate where everything is affected.
Yeah.
But just being paranoid is usually a little more narrow and focused with slight insight, and they're able to kind of talk through it with someone where someone paranoid personality disorder, off limits. We're not going there.
This is interesting as you're talking through. I'm realizing there are, people that I always say to them, like, when did your your natural trust in the world get broken, right? It's this everyone's out to get me. I can't give away my credit card number to anywhere. I need to get the mail, pick up my mail from a P.O. box. I won't do online banking. It's this kind of like general mistrust in
The world and anyone
by
and
everything.
everything.
Okay, I think they would probably fall in paranoid personality disorder. Now that I think about it.
So feelings, thoughts, and behaviors.
Yeah.
So definitely more broad.
Everyone's a threat.
Yes.
Everyone's out to get you.
Every situation is a threat.
Yeah, which is just to say a very hard way to go through life, right? Because it causes a lot of anxiety. Yeah.
But someone maybe who did fall for a Social Security scam and they're paranoid now about moving forward with giving out their Social Security number, that does not mean they have paranoid personality disorder.
Right.
So we shouldn't sling it around and say, hey, why are you so paranoid? Or, oh my goodness, she's so paranoid. She thinks we're always talking about her.
Yeah.
Not appropriate.
Yeah. Okay. And now we're going to move into cluster B.
Ooh, the fun stuff.
The fun stuff. So what do we want to start with?
Narcissism.
Narcissism. Okay.
Narcissism should not
I'll be laughing to expel some of my uncomfortability. No,
All right, I'm going to make a statement real fast about cluster B.
okay.
Cluster B should not be used as character assassination.
Interesting.
And that is what's being done right now with he's a narcissist. I can't be friends with her. She's borderline.
I hear it a lot in when people are not trying, but like looking to cut off their parents, they really label a lot of them narcissists, which tricky, but yeah.
Mhm. So using these terms right now in society is used as a weapon.
Mhm.
And as soon as we give someone that label, we want it to stick and other people shouldn't be around them.
Yeah.
And the truth, not there.
Okay, so let's talk about the DSM definition of narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. Okay, so they have traits including grandiosity, but tricky about that, it often massive, very deep, deep insecurity. So Actually, let me back up a little bit. I think narcissism is defined by protection of ego.
Oh, absolutely. It's an
So
overcompensation.
yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to relate all of these to back to ego because that's kind of how I make sense of it in my head. So grandiosity, which is masking how insecure they really feel. A need for excessive admiration that again feeds the ego. A lack of empathy is an inability to take accountability, which can hurt the ego, right?
Why we take accountability, we're admitting that there's something not
Right.
right
We
with
did
us.
something wrong and we feel bad about it, right? So that lack of empathy. And just to say, people with real MPD do a lot of things that are wrong. Like,
You usually will not hear an apology from someone
right.
with NPD.
Interpersonal exploitation. So that to me just means they cause a lot of chaos, right? So I just want to say when we're talking about these actual personality disorders, they're not great,
No.
right? So we can't. It's hard to speak, compassionately about someone who is a narcissist because they do wreak a lot of havoc in their personal lives, in their families, with their friends, at work, and yeah. So
But clinically, I love working with a narcissist. I love challenging them. There's no medication.
that's only because you see them every so often.
No, I have with this understanding and insight towards a narcissist, though, we know then in the clinical therapeutic relationship how to challenge them and help them gain insight and maybe advise towards a certain type of therapy or treatment. There's not going to be a specific medication that I can provide for narcissism,
Right.
but usually, let's say it's stemming from an inner anxiety or
Well, this is the next one. A fragile sense of self and shame beneath the surface, right?
so there's
So
some medication that can help with that. Keep
yeah,
going with your definition.
yeah. So that narcissists rarely seek treatment. The where I see it come up most often is a client will come in and talk about a parent, or I will get a couple and I will pick it up in in one of the other, or someone will talk about their partner and I will suspect it there. I always do disclose, though I will not diagnose someone that I haven't met. But the way I frame it is this person meets a lot of criteria.
Being the symptom.
Right. And we go through it. And yeah, so
And the purpose of helping the actual client understand if a narcissist is present in their life is to help them with understanding and how to navigate and support that person towards getting help or how to protect themselves in staying or leaving this relationship. Because leaving doesn't have to always be the ultimate outcome of someone with cluster B. Showing them a secure attachment in a relationship
yeah.
can diffuse a lot of the symptoms.
Yeah, these take time to work with. I do see a lot of stuff online about like they're a narcissist, leave them. Um, it's case by case, but like you said, I always say with couples if they're willing to come in the room and sit there and hear things about themselves and take it in, they're not a narcissist then. Maybe they have some conditioned behaviors or through their childhood upbringing, things that have happened to them. A lot of people have learned to think solely about themselves first, right? The idea there
Survive too.
right, no one else is gonna think about me, I'm gonna think about myself first. I see that a lot. That is not narcissism, that's narcissistic traits, right? Like, it's on a spectrum, right? You can have flavors of these personality disorders, it does not mean who you are at your core.
Yeah.
There are many examples of, like, true narcissistic personality disorders, through the media, in movies and stuff that, you can point to and say that person, meets those criteria.
We're in politics.
Yeah, lots. And someone argued to be a politician, you have to be narcissistic,
I
right?
could challenge that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, on what a narcissist is not specifically in the terms of relationship, whether that relationship is friendship with parents, with a partner, it's not someone who's overly confident. It's not
Yeah.
someone who's necessarily emotionally unavailable.
Or talks highly of themselves, not necessarily that, right?
No, and it's not someone who ghosted you. So when we say things like, I'm so glad I ended that relationship because they were a narcissist, they just ghosted me, not a clear clinical depiction of what true narcissism is.
Yeah. If you have been in a relationship with a true narcissist, you know it.
I feel gaslit. We talked about gaslit before.
Yeah.
You start to feel crazy or what's wrong with me or why don't I seem to grasp this?
Yeah.
Because again, the narcissist will deflect onto others around them.
Yeah. And I always help my clients sort of run experiments, right? So you kind of set a boundary with them. can they uphold the boundary or not? And then you get information about them, right? You can't change the outcome, right? You can only change like what you offer somebody or what you say to somebody. If they still continue to choose the behavior, then they might meet the criteria for a personality disorder, right?
And if someone does have narcissistic personality disorder, it does not mean, I'm going to say it again, end a relationship or you can't share a healthy relationship. It's what you're talking about with boundaries, insight, and really continuing to make sure that you're receiving respect.
Yeah. They can be abusive though.
Yes.
They can be really manipulative with money and jobs, like they can, they really try to get power and control. This is extremely complicated. My brain is kind of spinning on this. So this is definitely something for therapy, intense therapy, and also couples therapy. But
That's gonna
your
be
couples therapist should be able to help you detect what am I trying to say? Like, is this person going to grow or not in couples therapy? I've gotten like better about seeing that. And I always like highlight, like, look, there is a little bit of change happening. Any kind of change with anybody is a sense of hope. Okay.
You know my quote on change, right? My famous quote,
Yeah.
my mechanism quote that all my patients are probably tired of hearing. We choose the things we do not change.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So the next one is borderline.
Mhm. So borderline does not mean that we confuse a lot of times borderline and bipolar disorder.
One, I also just want to say borderline people love therapy.
And the truly borderline thoughts, feelings, and behaviors relationship with culture and society. We see a lot of splitting. So something is either all good one day and all bad the next day. We see unstable relationships with friends, family, partners. We see use of substances and self harm a lot of times in borderline personality disorders. What else do you want to touch on?
I will go through the actual DSM criteria for it. What I find most heartbreaking personally about people with borderline personality disorder is that all they want is a trusting, connected relationship.
Which is how
But
we
all
want
they
someone with
do,
borderline.
right? But all they do is manipulate and kind of challenge connection, right?
We usually develop borderline personality disorder because of insecure attachment through childhood.
Yeah.
Most times, if not always.
Yes. So symptoms are a strong fear of abandonment, which I touched on. This includes going to extreme measures so you're not separated or rejected. This is where codependency can come in,
Yeah.
right? A pattern of unstable, intense relationships.
Yeah, we touched
They typically are super invested in someone really quickly, all in. This is the best person ever. And then also can stop. And then if that person kind of does something that they perceive in the category of being against them, they will turn on them, and then that person is the worst. They
Like,
don't
like in a
care.
relationship with someone borderline, we see that love bombing in the beginning where we
Yeah.
are head over heels with them. Oh my goodness, they're perfect. This is perfect. And then we may be late to a date and they flip. And then we have that splitting where we're all bad.
Yeah. Quick changes in how you see yourself. So shifting goals and values, seeing yourself as bad as if you don't exist. Periods of stress-related paranoia, loss of contact with reality.
Yeah.
This one's hard. Impulsive and risky behavior. I think
Tough.
this is
That's
probably where
isn't self harm.
this is probably where it gets confused with bipolar disorder, I would say. Um, they do have some impulsive, risky behaviors. Threats of suicide or self-injury. So that's a huge one with borderline. So if you have someone in your life, and I don't say this lightly, that has threatened suicide multiple times, that typically is an indicator of borderline personality disorder. It's a quick one. You obviously want to investigate more, but
A lot of times also suicide is a threat. Like if you don't show up to my house or if you don't come to my party or if you're not on time, I'm going to have an attempt.
yeah,
So we have to live in fear of the person living with borderline, them having they usually live with SI, but then using it as a punishment towards us, which is yeah, again, we don't say it lightly, but we do see these trends.
yeah. And the last one was ongoing feelings of emptiness, which just makes me feel deeply sad. But that emptiness comes from their inability to connect and have strong relationships, right?
Which also leads to the impulsivity because they're searching for that dopamine, whether if it's through alcohol or cannabis or shopping or even a crazy night out
Yeah.
to fill the loneliness, emptiness that's not coming from secure attachments.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on the way it's been used in movies and TV shows. I know we had talked about borderline being depicted well, or no, let me take that out. Okay, So let's talk about how this term gets co-opted by pop culture.
Anyone who's disliked, we just throw
Or moves
people
through relationships really quickly. Like it's kind of a label.
friendship. Yeah, they're borderline.
Yeah.
Not true.
And I am going to call out lightly the therapist population. I do hear a lot of therapists say they refuse to work with someone who's borderline. And I think they are missing out on the opportunity to have, I mean, it is a challenge. I am not going to deny that. But when you get the wins or when you can teach them coping skills or new life
Like the
skills.
DBT, which is behavioral therapy,
Yeah.
that we see the growth in these patients, and then they see us as a secure attachment, and we have that safe space with them.
Yeah. You have to tolerate a lot. You have to have a lot of patience. You are in this for the long game, but it can be
So are they too.
right. And it can be a very rich relationship. So I do sometimes see, borderline people, whatever you want to call them, get dismissed.
Yeah, I think
Lost cases, but they're not.
as a mental health provider, when treating someone with borderline personality disorder, we needed to know exactly when to put on the gas and when to put on the brake.
Oh, yes. Yes,
But
I felt
it
that one.
so if someone says, "I don't treat borderline," usually I feel that they don't have strong clinical skills or feel so secure to know when to press the gas or the brake with these patients.
Yeah, and I will say in session, like, they will come for you. They will attack things about you or people in your life, and you have to know that that is part of the disorder, so to speak, not necessarily, like, what they really think, right, or who they are, right? It is a little bit of a mind game sometimes, and like I said, you have to be up for it. I do understand the reluctance, but I would say take one on and see where it goes.
So a great way to kind of test if someone in your life might have borderline, you feel like you're kind of in a chess game with them
Yeah.
and you need to stay a couple moves or thoughts ahead to protect yourself and the relationship. That usually tells us that this person might have borderline.
Yeah.
But it's also, as outside of us being clinicians, we are regular
Yeah.
people. As people and as our patients, it's not fair for us to just diagnose someone around us that's difficult to deal with borderline personality
That's
disorder.
right. Yeah.
Just because someone has a large personality or can be difficult to work with or deal with doesn't mean they're borderline.
Yeah.
Okay, so antisocial personality disorder sounds like it would be simple, but what it is not is someone who's not social. So just because someone doesn't like going to family parties or
Antisocial. Yeah.
isn't active in office talks doesn't mean they're antisocial.
It's actually interesting once we get into what it really means that it's been co-opted this way because it is such a serious diagnosis and disorder.
Serious, very serious diagnosis.
It's scary, let's say, but yeah, someone who avoids social, like you said, yeah, it's
It's
not
not
antisocial.
It's not the quiet kid. It's not the woman who's afraid to speak up at a PTA meeting.
And you should not call yourself antisocial.
No, please don't. So, someone who's antisocial means that they have disregard for others,
Yeah.
and usually they're unlawful. So, most criminals who are in prison most likely have antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah, so it's categorized by repeatedly breaking the law, being deceitful, so they will lie for anything. Being impulsive or incapable of planning ahead. That's kind of interesting.
I didn't know that one.
I didn't either. Being irritable and aggressive, having a reckless disregard for their safety or the safety of others, and being consistently irresponsible. And the hallmark, lack of remorse.
Yes. Bingo.
Yeah. So we see this a lot, obviously, with criminal trials that get broadcast everywhere. Yeah.
Abuse of a child will feel nothing.
Yeah.
We could
Yeah.
call out some court cases right now with some famous celebrities who
Yeah.
is a famous rapper and is pleading not guilty to all charges when there's videos and pure evidence
Yeah.
and still no remorse.
Yeah, and a little bit of etymology here, if you will. So, antisocial personality disorder, I know, can start as what's called conduct disorder. So, when you are a kid or a teenager, um, this is a tricky area. I did work in schools for a little while, and I saw this term ODD getting thrown around a lot. So, it's
Oppositional defiant disorder.
It's an interesting pathway, so to speak, right? And this is a word that got co-opted for sure, ODD. It's ODD to conduct disorder to antisocial, right?
That's how we're taught in school.
Yeah, and these are the kids that just don't respect authority.
Don't care if they get detention. They don't care what repercussions are there for their actions.
But when you work with them, which, I did, extensively, what I saw is they're just looking for attention, right? So it's typically kids that are neglected at home or have tons of siblings and they just are not getting their needs met, right? So they learn if I do positive or negative behaviors, I get attention. And they learn to sort of, kind of be immune to the negative consequences because they're still getting the attention, right? These are the kids in the schools that would get so much attention. They would get to spend, 30, 45 minutes with me every week, right? Of course, they're going to continue to act out, right? That does not necessarily mean ODD. We actually probably should do an episode on ODD.
Right.
It is interesting. Yeah.
To speak on that, we usually do see this pattern of oppositional defiant to or
Conduct disorder is, when they start, oppositional defiant is really about authority figures.
Yes.
Conduct is when they start stealing, breaking into things, lying, just all of them are sort of characterized by disrespect for authority. Just don't care about what anyone says.
So again, we see the evolution from youth.
Yeah.
So if we are able to address this in an appropriate way with appropriate resources at a younger age, can be preventable.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes having a connection with somebody. I think I'm a broken record here, but just having an adult figure that you don't see as a threat, that you don't see, that you can respect, right? They are taught over their lives not to respect adults.
Right. That one teacher might have so much appreciation for teachers or
principal.
coach, mentor,
Yeah.
can change a child's life. And there are children out there who go, I didn't end up in jail because of Miss Jones or Miss Smith.
Yeah.
And it's really true because they showed them that love doesn't have to be conditional and that attention can come from someone outside of their home life.
Yeah. So, yeah, antisocial personality disorder, very scary.
Yeah.
If it's gone too far, you'll know.
Yeah.
I would say, like I said, most criminals that we see broadcast everywhere probably fit the criteria for that. And also, serial killers, which we'll get into in another episode.
Yeah. So we're now going to touch on cluster C, and the last one that we're going to be talking about in this series.
Which is not all of cluster C.
No, it's just one of them, which is avoidant personality disorder.
Yeah, this one we were kind of learning as we go. There's actually a lot here.
One of the most misunderstood personality disorders.
And I do think people self-identify here too. I'm avoidant. Like, I don't want to have that conversation. I'm avoidant. Or these are people who I think say, like, I don't like conflict. And, they just sort of, shy away from things that are difficult.
And it doesn't mean someone has social anxiety or social phobia.
Yeah. And it's actually the actual avoidant personality disorder has some interesting facets to it.
Again, goes back to ego and the fear of rejection.
Yeah. So some signs and behaviors are choosing isolation over social situations.
Yeah.
Hypersensitivity to criticism.
Yes. It's that ego. They cannot feel any negative feelings about self.
Fear of being embarrassed. And then poor self-image. So this is interesting too. They may be reluctant to become involved with others unless they know for sure that others will like them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is characterized by, interactions with others, it sounds like. Yeah.
But it's not just in a certain situation. Again, we need to remind ourselves that these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are chronic, present daily throughout someone's entire life in how they relate with culture, society. So just because someone doesn't like to give presentations in a work environment or speak up doesn't mean that they're avoidant personality disorders. This means like they're not doing anything that makes them vulnerable whatsoever, even if it comes down to a new hairstyle or nail color. They're very patterned and routine.
I actually think this might be more prevalent, maybe just the flavors of it or some of the behaviors of it than people realize. Like reading through this, I'm like, a lot of people do this. And I wonder too if it's an artifact of, not to bring back social media again, but this involves being in front of people, right? And interacting in person. So now that we are all behind our phones and talking like that, my brain is going to like online dating and how there's a lot of chatter, I call it. I'm like, stop chit-chatting and make a date. All my clients know I say that.
Don't get us start us on online dating.
And no, they're like, Rachel, is that how it works? And I'm like, you could chit-chat forever. Why don't we go and see if there's chemistry, right? But there is an avoidance there because, well, there's many reasons.
But that would have to be present to characterize as a personality disorder. I overlap. So they're showing it in dating. They're showing it in friendships. They're showing it in the work environment.
New situations, right? Like,
anything new.
Yeah, the best example of this is when your kids go to school. I think there are so many ways to get exposed to new people, right? There's the PTA, there's the school sports, there's the class moms, right? So a lot of people avoid all of that because then they have to kind of make new friends, right?
So we
Go
go
put themselves out there, right? And talk about themselves and, yeah.
we go back to this general term of personality disorder, and usually it comes down to people that we don't really like. So why, and again, that's a bit of the stigma coming through, but why we wouldn't like someone with avoidant personality disorder is they don't make themselves
I was gonna say we wouldn't know them.
Yeah, that's true. That they wouldn't make themselves relatable. They're not volunteering. They're not engaging with us. So we then feel like, what's wrong with us? And that this person doesn't want to be part of the school social or the family
Yeah.
gathering because we think maybe that they're selfish or self-involved. And really it's avoidant personality disorder.
And extreme shyness, right? I do think shyness is often masqueraded as being kind of cold and mean when really I'm like, I think that person is just reserved and shy. Yeah.
And this can come from insecure attachments from youth.
Yes.
And not having that capability as a child to maybe explore sports or the arts and really get to have relationship with self and others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so personality disorders, we have
Big topic, but I think we kind of covered like the top hitters.
yeah, definitely. So I think what we need to take from this is that treatment is available. Where we start is with self awareness, and that there aren't medications for these specifically, but we can medicate some of the symptoms. Like an anxiety medication might help someone with avoidant personality disorder, or someone with borderline might benefit from an antidepressant
Okay.
because of that loneliness and self isolation.
Yeah, those darker thoughts that they have. Yeah.
So they are treatable. And it also means as humans, we shouldn't just X these people from our lives and we shouldn't label them. And that showing them some consistent, persistent love or attention or trust can help these people.
Yeah. Some of them.
Some of them. Very well said. Some of them.
Because I do want to say that if you are in a what you would characterize as an abusive relationship with either someone antisocial or you suspect or narcissist and you suspect, like obviously something to talk through with a professional, but you do want to get out of that.
I need to make sure you're safe.
Yeah.
Psychologically safe, physically
This
safe.
is all this is why we can't speak so generally about this, right? Because each is a case by case basis.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we hope what you learned today is that personality disorders are complex. And while we did kind of highlight ones that we think are most popular or popularly used, there's many more. And each of them is so intricate, developed over time, not usually something anyone's born with.
So we don't want
Really
to,
sad.
yeah, we don't want to use them as jokes. We don't want to be like, you took 2 selfies? What a narcissist.
Right.
We don't want to use them as an insult. And we don't want to use them for shaming. That's not the purpose of a diagnosis. And it really does discredit to the people who are suffering with these diagnoses.
Yeah. So, it's important to just be mindful of the terms you use, how you describe people. Again, what has been just adopted into your lexicon that you maybe can, tweak a little bit to be a little bit more accurate. I don't know. Yeah.
And let's not use them as revenge. So,
And weapons. Yeah.
I think talking about the topics such as personality disorders is so important and empowering because we can unlearn and then we can relearn how to appropriately use and cope and treat people with these diagnoses and the terms that we keep talking about. Okay, so that concludes episode 4 of our summer series. We're excited as we continue to move through the summer and work on some other pop culture therapy talk topics. And we look forward to you listening. We are on Spotify and YouTube, and we are now working on being present on Apple Podcast.
Yes. So look for us on all places that you take in content.
Follow, like, share, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Thank you for listening. Make sure to subscribe to The Mental Edit and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Give this video a like if you found it helpful and drop a comment with your thoughts or questions. We want to hear from you. You can also DM us on Instagram at The Mental Edit with topics you'd love for us to cover. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. No fluff, no BS, just real talk about what healing actually looks like.